around 8 o'clock, just before 8 o'clock in the morning, and they go to some type of like emergency dental clinic or walk-in dental clinic. And she gets a tooth pulled. These are some pictures, selfies she took of herself in the dentist chair, and you can see the side of her mouth on the left side there, I think, is kind of swollen. She sent these to Daniel, Young, and Danny, who was sitting out in the waiting room waiting for her. And so after this, they do not go back to work. They go home. And the rest of the waking hours of the day are pretty normal. They get some lunch. They relax. Her mouth is bothering her. She's tired. She's sore. And eventually, at about 4:30 in the afternoon, they go and they pick up the 3 kids from the babysitter from the shelf, and they bring them home. So at that point, Danny, the defendant, and the 3 kids are in the house. Now, Paul, he worked at the same warehouse, but he worked a later shift, and you'll hear what it is. It's something like 2 p.m. to late at night, around 10 or so. That was Paul's shift. So same place, different shift. So he's not there in the afternoon. Now they're there. They do dinner. They do bath time. They put the kids down. Quentin in his pack and play. I think you'll hear testimony or a statement from the defendant that Sky, the infant, slept on that couch that we looked at, and Zane in the race car bed. And I think it'll be undisputed, and I expect that it'll be undisputed that, at around 10 p.m., Quentin is fine. He's just in his crib, in his pack and play for bedtime. Okay. And what happens at this point sets off a chain of events that goes over the next couple hours and results in tragedy. And that is that the defendant and Daniel have yet another argument about how he's treating her. This is sometime a little after 10 p.m. And that this is something she told to detectives eventually in some of her interviews. About how he doesn't want her, he doesn't want to touch her, he's not feeling desire for her like he used to. We've already talked about this is a major trigger for her. This is the biggest emotional issue going on in her life, and it's significant. It drove her to the brink in the video that you've watched. This is not a minor thing for her. And so she leaves the house after 10 p.m. on the first of 2 trips that you'll hear a lot about in this trial, and that she didn't really want to talk about, at least truthfully, with investigators. And that first trip is to the drug dealer. She says that she left so that things wouldn't escalate between her and Danny. She was upset. That's her word. So it wouldn't escalate. The first place she goes is this Circle K. And I should have pointed out that you can see her getting out of the car. And that's at 10:29 p.m. So about 10:30. I'll back up and you can see her getting out of her Dodge Journey with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She's not in a good state. Anyway, 10:30, she goes into the Circle K. She buys a couple convenience store items. And then she texts Danny. He's got her saved in his phone as Lanny Baby. She texts him, I'm going to run to 204, I guess. That's at 10:32. Immediately after she leaves the Circle K. She might still be in the parking lot for all I know. And 204 is an area you'll hear about in this case. It's sort of it's shorthand for our drug dealer. I'm going to run to our drug dealer. This is Highway 204 is what this is a reference to. And their drug dealer lives on a street right off 204. So she's going to get drugs to try to make herself feel better. This is a screenshot of some GPS plots from her phone that the police eventually made after getting into her phone. You can see Highway 204 here. And this red kind of blob up here is a series of GPS points showing that she's at the drug dealer's house on Arkwright Lane from about 10:45 p.m. to 10:55. And she's scoring drugs to use that night because she doesn't like the way she's feeling. This is some information exported from her cell phone extraction showing that while she was there, at 10:49, she made an $80 Cash App payment to a Timothy Weston, who is her drug dealer, or at least one of them. While she's gone, Paul gets home. He had clocked out at 9:56 p.m. And I think he will say that he took him a minute to get home because he was smoking a blunt in the parking lot or something like that. You're going to hear a lot about drug use in this case. And he gets home while the defendant is still out on this trip to the drug dealer. And he'll tell you that when he got home, he went in and said hey to Danny. And he saw the kids, he saw Quentin in his crib, in his pack and play. Quentin was fine. He even interacted with him a little bit. He'll tell you what it was. Hey, little man, how's it going? And he sees that Quentin is, hey, okay, he's fine. May not be completely asleep yet, but he's there and he's okay. Now, by 10 after 11, this is another GPS screenshot. It's hard to make out on this TV. But this is, by 10 after 11, she's got a bunch of GPS points hitting at the house on Buckhalter Road. And this is just to signify that this is around when she gets home. 10 after 11. And so she's home at that point. Paul is upstairs in his bedroom, going to sleep, kind of secluded from the rest of the family. And Danny eventually goes to sleep as well. And you'll hear her say this to the investigators, that she was the only one up and active in the middle of the night, in the hours leading up towards 1 a.m. Danny is sleeping because he's going to get up and go to work in the morning. He has to get up at sometime between 5 and 5:30 to go to work. And Paul is sleeping as well because he just got off work. He's tired. And you'll hear her say that I was the only one up and about. My tooth was hurting. I couldn't sleep. What she's doing is she's going on a bender. You'll hear her admit to this eventually with the police. She didn't want to talk about it initially, but you'll hear that she eventually acknowledged that she was up kind of frantically using drugs for an extended period of time while everybody else in the house is asleep and out of play. You'll hear her talk about it. I would hit a line. I would go outside. I would smoke a blunt to kind of bring myself down. Maybe smoke a cigarette. Then I'd hit another line and repeat the cycle. So she's in her house by herself, physically uncomfortable because of her dental issue, emotionally wrecked because of what's going on with her and Danny that's resurfaced again this night. Well, the resurface is probably not the way to put it because it's just an ever-present problem for her. And this is a bad situation. Right? This is a volatile, dangerous situation. And that's because you'll hear something that she later said during the investigation on a recorded call, on a recorded phone call to Daniel, who was cooperating with the police and trying to help them gain information about the effect that cocaine has on her. It's not just fun for her. You'll hear her say that it makes her angry and impulsive.
I will not touch. I'll not touch the cooking the others. Yeah. I become angry and impulsive when I'm like. And
so those are the conditions She's up all alone, physically uncomfortable, emotionally unhappy, unstable to some degree. And around 1 a.m. probably, she kills Quentin. Now I'm going to focus on the what she did and when things happened. And probably in closing argument when all the evidence is in, we'll talk to you a little bit more about the why exactly in that moment did she do this. But for now, I want you to just understand the sequence of events and what happened when. She takes his body and puts it in Dodge Journey, Georgia tag TEN 9300. And she begins the cover-up. The cover-up is not just the lies to the police. The cover-up starts immediately. A little after 1 a.m., she drives down Buckhalter Road, which turns to the right here, but it's still Buckhalter Road at that turn. And comes into Ogeechee Road right here. And she pulls into this mobile home plaza. It's right here. Mostly what you're seeing is trees, but there are mobile homes in here. This is Azalea Mobile Home Plaza. And there's a convenient stand-up dumpster sort of hidden away under some tree cover in the tree line there. And she throws Quentin's body away like a piece of trash at about 1:17 in the morning. She drives home. This is another export from her phone, showing that her phone was locked from 2:01 in the morning until 9:13 in the morning. And this is just kind of a shorthand way of saying that's roughly about the time she eventually goes to sleep. And her phone is inactive. Now Danny wakes up for work a little after 5, and he tries to wake her up to go to work. She's supposed to go to work with him. Remember, they work the same shift. She has been up all night doing drugs, and he's been, responsibly sleeping, so he's able to get up for work. And he cannot wake her up. She will not wake up. And at this point, he's trying to get out of the house to go to work. And he believes that all 3 children are there. He does not go over and check the packet plane. He doesn't even know that Quentin is gone. You saw in those pictures the packet plane is all the way across the room in the far corner. It's not right next to the closet. It's not right next to the bathroom. He can't wake her up to go to work, and he's annoyed by this because this is, I think he may tell you it's not the first time this has happened. And they are kind of tight on money. They are trying to make money to either put a down payment on a house or a security deposit on an apartment so they don't have to live with their mom anymore. And he'll tell you that he was frustrated by this. You're not going to get up and come to work and make money. And his decision at this time was to say, well, okay, if you're not going to come to work and make money, we're not going to spend money on a babysitter today. Because they're paying her every day, Michelle. And so he texts Michelle, hey, the kids are going to stay here with her today, Miss Michelle, at 5:20 in the morning. She says, okay. And the reason for that is his thought is, look, if you're not going to get up and make money, you can stay here and watch the kids. Wake up and find these kids are still here. You can deal with them. They're yours. So he goes to work, and he clocks in at 6:11. 6 a.m., 6:11 a.m. And he will clock out at 9:15, a little over 3 hours later. And the reason that he clocks out at 9:15 is that at 9:14, 1 minute before the clock out, he gets a call from the defendant who's got him saved in her phone as King. And he's got the 910 area code. That's North Carolina, where he's from. Now, this is a 21-minute call. And she calls him, and the cover-up, initially I said, the cover-up starts with covering this up to him. before the police, she covered up to the police, but before they ever even get involved, she's covering it up to Danny. She calls him and she tells him that she woke up, the front door was open and Quentin was gone. And he would run out to his car, leave work and come home, and stay on the line with her for 21 minutes. Police went to the warehouse that they work at, and they got some video footage to see, well, what did Danny look like when he was leaving the house, leaving work, having gotten this call. And this video shows him running out. That's Danny running out of work. You'll hear from his boss, a fellow named David Mullins, that David ran into Danny in the parking lot. Danny's running out. Dave is just pulling in and getting to work. And they briefly encounter one another. And Dave will tell you, he looked genuinely upset. He was for real crying, tears coming down his face. Danny does not know what is going on. He knows what he's hearing from the defendant, and that's it. So he rushes home. And I'll tell you this, I told you the call to Danny was at 9:14. As he's on the way home, on this call with the defendant where she's telling him she woke up and the front door was open, these are ADT records. There's an ADT security system on this house, and it keeps track of when each door was open and closed, or just opened, or just closed, having been open. Police got these records, and you'll see that front door didn't open until 9:22 in the morning on October the 5th. Now that's 6 minutes in, 6 or 8 minutes in to that call with Danny. And so the evidence is going to show that she's on the phone with him saying, I woke up and the front door was open and Quentin was gone. And it's during that phone call that she's opening the front door. So you'll hear that she's essentially tampering with evidence, tampering with the scene, staging the scene to fit with her story before the police ever become involved. Danny gets home. Somehow babysitter Michelle got wind that this was going on. Maybe she heard screaming or something. She'll tell you how she heard about this when she testifies. She comes over. Paul hears yelling, comes downstairs, and now everybody's there and they're looking for Quentin. And the defendant, of course, is the only person who knows where he actually is, and that's in a dumpster at Azalea Mobile Home Plaza. And they call 911, and here's what the defendant says.
Get my son! Get my player outside! I woke up and the front door is open and his PlayStation is empty, please!
Police show up a little before 10 a.m., and she repeats the same story to them. The evidence will show that car that's like the furthest one, the most recent one that entered the driveway, is the babysitter's, Michelle's. She had pulled up and parked her white Pathfinder there. But in any case, the defendant repeats that story to the responding officers, and you'll hear from some of them.
Hey, Marine 3 off the board. You got a lot of evidence today. You talked to that.
I woke up about 10 o'clock and my husband was worried about 6, so within a 3-hour period, somehow the front door is unlocked and my son is found in his playpen.
Now, this is a missing child. So situations like this, it's all hands on deck. Everybody comes out. Forensics comes out. Like the forensics unit came out, had a drone up looking for Quentin. Patrol officers are being pulled from other beats, other areas of patrol, to canvass the area and look for Quentin in the woods. All sorts of people are coming. Most of the command staff for the Chatham County Police Department showed up because this is a big deal and they take these things very seriously. One of the specialized units that responded after patrol officers had gotten there was the detectives for the Chatham County Police Department, CID, Criminal Investigations division. And the first detective there for CID is a guy you'll hear from, Sean Wilkins. Sean Wilkins shows up, and he's the one who conducts the first, what you call more like the first formal interview with the defendant. And most notable from that statement that he takes from her at this time is when she says she went to bed and when she says she got up. And you'll hear that she tells him, I went to bed around midnight and I got up around 9. She doesn't say anything at all about this trip to Azalea Mobile Home Plaza a little after 1 a.m. She doesn't want to talk about that because that's the trip that she took to get rid of Quentin's body. So here's her telling Wilkins, I went to bed around midnight and I got up around 9 a.m.
When's the last time you saw your child?
When I went to bed last night.
And what time was that? Do
It
you
was
remember?
around 12.
12? Okay.
12 when I went to bed. I had my wisdom teeth removed yesterday.
I'm sorry, that's
So I went to bed kind of late.
I get you. Listen, I had them out too.
So and I got up this morning about 9.
About 9?
And my front door is open, so I went up and I shut it, not thinking about anything like that. And I look over and check my kids, and he was fine. All the rest were there. He was fine.
It's alright. It's alright.
Went to bed at midnight, woke up around 9. No mention of the Azalea trip. I told you there were 2 trips, 2:04 earlier in the night, 10:11. Trip number 2 is that Azalea trip, a little after 1 a.m. And she is totally omitting that. Now, all hands on deck, right? Missing child. There are detectives working on this case that aren't even out at the scene from the very beginning. One of them is a Chatham County police detective you'll hear from named Kiana Robbins. Kiana Robbins is at the Islands precinct, I think is where she was, on Johnny Mercer. Like, not anywhere close to here. But she's in her office, she's sitting at her computer, and she's researching. She's seeing if she can find some helpful information. This is a stock photo of what's called a flock camera. The flock system is a series of cameras that are set up around town at major intersections or along busy roads. And what they do is they snap a picture of the license plates of all the cars that drive by. And police can use these for a number of different things. One of the things they can use them for is, say you have somebody who flees from a traffic stop and actually gets away, and the police can't pursue them without undue danger. They can take that tag number of that individual, they can put it in the flock system and put like a lookout out for them. If that tag hits on any other cameras, it'll alert the police and they can try again and make the traffic stop. Another thing that the police can do, and what Detective Robbins did, was look up vehicles registered to the defendant. She finds that Dodge Journey that the defendant drove to dispose of Quentin's body, and she puts it into the flock system, looks it up in the database to see what, if any, flock cameras that vehicle has hit on anytime recently. And she sees that that car has been out late at night, driving around on trips that the defendant hasn't mentioned yet. She radios that information, or maybe calls via phone. This is the tag she looks up. That's the Dodge Journey in the driveway at the time of the police response. She calls Lieutenant Foster, whom you'll hear from. This is after the defendant has told Wilkins that she went to bed at midnight and woke up at 9, and hasn't mentioned anything about the original trip, or the Azalea trip. Foster goes up to her. He now has this information that this tag has been hitting on some flock cameras and seems to have been driving around during the night. And he goes up to her, and he's a lieutenant at this point, which is like kind of a managerial type position. He's, by this time, is the senior man on scene, I believe. But he has background in investigations. He was with the Savannah Police Department, I think, at one point, in their violent crimes unit, investigating homicide. So he knows his way around an investigation. He knows how to do these sort of things. He goes up to her armed with this information about the flock hits at night. He wants to know what these trips were about. So he goes up to her and he asks her, hey, did you go anywhere last night? And he's a savvy guy, so he's careful to tack on, you know, like where the kidnapper could have followed you home. And she seems to know, the evidence will show that she seems to know that he knows something about this trip to Azalea that she took and has not mentioned to this point. And so she comes up with a story. It's not totally clear when she came up with it. But the story is that, oh, that trip that I took away from my house shortly after 1 a.m., that was to go pick up Oragel from a friend at the Chevron. Now the Chevron is right next to Azalea Mobile Home Plaza. They're kind of right next to each other. And so that's her story as to what she was doing driving to that location at that time. My tooth was bothering me. I didn't have any Oragel. I went to pick some up and got some from a friend. This is the first appearance of the Oragel story, which lasts for about a week or so, maybe a week and a half.
Did y'all go anywhere last night or yesterday with Faith that maybe he could have followed you or something? Y'all didn't go anywhere? No, I mean just maybe you yourself.
Yeah, I know, because I got my tooth pulled yesterday, so I went to go to the Orville, that was it.
2 o'clock yesterday afternoon?
No, like morning at 5, because I couldn't go to sleep.
Okay, so where'd you go?
Right up the road, right here, got Chevron. And my friend that I used to work with, she had Orville, because they didn't have me, I said, okay, I'm home.
Okay. Did you go anywhere else? Have you made anything been home? So when did you get home?
I can tell you exactly what's going on. Well, even too, I was home at 25.
At number 25?
So I was gone for literally 12 minutes.
All right, so that's the story about what I was doing when I drove there. Now, I'll tell you this. She's trying to show him on her phone this trip on an app called Life 360. Life 360 kind of generally tracks your movements. You can join with your family, and they can see where you are and have been, and vice versa. You may be wondering, well, look, if this trip was so sinister in nature, why is she trying to show it to him on her phone? And you'll hear testimony that the reason that she was comfortable holding out her phone as corroboration for this trip to the Chevron is that, again, the Chevron and Azalea Mobile Home Plaza are right next to each other. And looking at the screen, you can't necessarily tell which one she's at. You can only tell that she's in the general area. So she believes that this kind of helps prove that I'm telling the truth about being at the Chevron. Now, the police would later pull very precise GPS data from the phone, like not just looking at the screen, but from the actual phone, that puts her not at the Chevron, but right at the dumpsters at Azalea, which are, I don't know, maybe 100 yards, 75 yards from the Chevron. But that's why she's holding the Life 360 out and saying, look, this helps me. So that's the first appearance of the Oragel story, to explain the Azalea trip. They take, the police take all 3 of the adults in the house. Eventually they say, you know, we really need you to get Danny, Paul, and the defendant to the police station, sit them down for formal interviews, and just get like a complete sequence of the day from all 3 of these people. And the first interview with the defendant takes place in something that they call the lactation room or the nursing room. I think you sometimes also hear these things referred to as mothering rooms. And the reason for that is that Danny was in the single interview room that they have with the cameras wired up in the corners and all that. And this video is recorded on Detective Marion Lemon's phone. Now, by this time, this is a joint federal and local investigation. The FBI has shown up because they get involved in kidnappings, abduction cases. And what happens at headquarters is that they pair off teamwork. One FBI agent, one detective, and they each in a pair interview each of these people. And so Detective Lemons is paired up with Special Agent Brad Snyder, whom you'll hear from, and they were kind of partners throughout this investigation. And it's very open-ended at the beginning. What they're asking for is just give us an account of your day. Give us an account of the last 24 hours. Where have you been? What have you done? And so you'll hear Snyder asking him this. The video is really nothing special. I think it's just ceiling tiles the entire time because the phone is sitting on a table. But the audio is good. You can hear her. And she starts with, we left the dentist and came home. So she does start at the beginning.
So right now, again, we're sorry for everything happening. We can't imagine the emotions that you're feeling right now. But it's difficult just, just kind of think back the last 24 hours and just kind of give me, what you've been through in the past 24 hours. So we talk 24 hours would be this time yesterday. So from about 1 o'clock yesterday, just tell me your...
So that's the start. I was leaving the dentist, getting my wisdom tooth pulled. And the end is the Oragel story, the Chevron Oragel story that she has as her last trip of the night. Again, she admitted that to Wilkins, is now had to come up with a story to cover this trip.
My wife was really bothering me about almost 1 in the morning. I called Circle K to see if they had Oragel. No. So I got in contact with another one of my friends named Misty that I used to work with. He has a lot of mouth problems, and asked her if she had any Oragel. I met her at the Chevron. And I called her and got back home. Y'all, so 12 minutes. I got it for like 360. I can show y'all right around. Everything was on the left outside your back. Get home, turn my mouth, check all the kids again, they were okay.
Now, a couple things about this initial interview in which she's asked to give an account of her movements for like the last 24 hours. No mention whatsoever of the trip to the drug dealer. She doesn't want to talk about what she was doing that night in the state that it put her in. So that's omitted completely from this interview. And now she's put a name to the friend who gave her the Oragel. Misty is what she calls her. Now, I'll tell you before we move on from that, I'll tell you this. The police asked her to go through her phone, and of course she's playing, the victim. I'm the victim, the mother victim of a child abduction. So she probably feels some pressure to cooperate, and so she lets them go through her phone. A couple things I see is there's no call to Misty, and there's no call to Circle K to check and see if they have Oragel, which is something she said. First I called Circle K to check and see whether they had Oragel. They didn't, so then I called Misty. None of that in there at all. They also see a message from the defendant to Danny. We looked at this earlier. This is when she's leaving the Circle K and is about to go to the drug dealer at 10:30. Going to run to 204, I guess. This is something that she had left out in this initial interview with Snyder and Lemons. So they interview her again, and this time it's in the interview room. And they want to ask her, what's the deal with this 204 thing? Here's what she tells them. Oh, yeah, that was a trip to the drug dealer, but it wasn't actually to buy drugs. She tells them that the reason that she left the house at 10:30 at night and went to her drug dealer and was there for 10 minutes was simply to pay off a pre-existing drug debt in the amount of $20. Now, the evidence will show that that story is just absurd on its face. But in addition to that, the cash out was for $80, not $20. And she'll later admit that this story wasn't true. But here she is launching it.
Yeah, and I was already heading back by the time that...
So at 10:40, you texted him that you were turning on 204 to go meet Red?
Yeah, like I'm turning on 204 now, like I'm about to meet him. That's what I was trying to tell him. So.
And at that point, you didn't get anything.
No, I just paid him $20. I gave him $20 and I left. It was a couple days ago.
She's paying off a $20 debt, not actually buying drugs. Because after all, she tells them, other than marijuana, I don't use drugs.
See, you didn't get a Percocet for that year after.
I spent $20. And even if I did want to get a Percocet, like $35.
Last time I asked him.
I was 6%. I don't do it like that. Like, anything, anybody got to worry about anything with me is on me. Because that was me. I almost thought that. Everything else now, my mom was there, I watched her eat. I seen her always get covered in police and touch. So I said, anything that's not homegrown or thought of the convenience store, I don't want. When I'm homegrown, I don't need to cook those stuff when I'm not hurt. Homegrown is wrong. Not creative.
Very strong, detailed denial of the use of any drugs other than marijuana. And the reason they're asking her whether she got a Percocet from the drug dealer that night is that they had seen some messages about buying Percocets as well when they went through her phone. And they asked her about that. What about these text messages with you? Look like you're buying Percocet, using Percocet. And her story at this time is, oh, those are for a friend. I'm just the middleman for my friend Cheyenne, who likes Percocets but doesn't, I guess, know a dealer herself.
Some things, that you just have to answer for, so we have to get a better understanding as to, what went on. You know that we gave us the authorization to go through the text messages. There's text messages in there unless you purchasing Percocet. As recently as within the past 24 to 48 hours. So just, do you mind telling me about that? Is that dated, or help me understand that?
It's dated. So,
What's your story?
sometimes when you ask me if I've done it, I haven't done it recently. I do have a friend named Cheyenne. Cheyenne Crosby, who lives in Florida. She will call me from time to time. If I see a call log, she will help me along the way. Ask me for a Percocet or whatever if I can get it. And I'll pay for it. I'll drop it off. Whatever work is dropped off, they should have let me know. So, but no, we haven't been messing with the Percocets.
She does not want to talk about her drug use that night because that contributed directly to the state of mind that she was in and relates so closely to her killing Quentin in the middle of the night. So she feels that she has to tell these lies. And she wants to focus on 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. because after all, this is an abduction. It's not as though I did anything in the middle of the night. My child was taken after Danny left for work. That's her story. That's what she's trying to sell. And again, she forcefully denies this.
No, I did not. I did not take a Percocet right now. I will piss and cup for you right now.
Now, police follow up, okay? At October 5th, they get statements from the defendant, where she's making all these claims that we've talked about. They get a statement from Paul, they get a statement from Danny. And what you do, and this goes late into the night, eventually it's kind of time to stop on October 5th and wake up in the morning and follow up on some of this stuff. So she has said that she was at the Chevron getting Oragel from Misty, her former co-worker. And so they go out and there are two real notable things that happen between the October 5th statements on day one and the next interview. And one is that they do what they call a video canvas. They go out to this Chevron area where she has said that this Oragel exchange happened. And they look around and they see if they see any cameras. They go in and they ask if there's footage. And they get footage from the Chevron. And it does not show her stopping there. In fact, it shows her driving by. And they get footage from Azalea next door. And this is a major break in the case, because what the Azalea footage shows is her pulling in, doing a loop around the complex, and pulling up to the dumpsters and sitting there for about 2 minutes. And that's when she throws Quentin's body away. So you're going to hear in detail about the footage from Azalea the different cameras and camera angles and what you could see on which one. But this is just a sample of that. And this is her driving in the Dodge Journey after 1 a.m. on a mission to throw away her dead child. So that's one notable item of follow-up that leads into the next interview. The other is that they go talk to Melissa Missy Bray. Now, the defendant's calling her Misty on the first night. She doesn't even get her name right. But she describes her as a former co-worker from Bojangles. So Special Agent Snyder goes out to Bojangles, asks whether they can direct him to this person. They do. He goes out and he interviews her. And he asks her when the last time that she saw the defendant was. And she tells him, I haven't seen her for months. The last time that I saw her was when she ran it. It was like in July of 2022, months before what we're talking about. The defendant had run out of gas near Missy's house, had walked to Missy's house, and had borrowed a gas can. And their last contact was Missy texting her a few times, saying, hey, can I get that gas can back? And that was it. And that was months before. And Special Agent Snyder looked at these messages and they corroborate what Missy is telling him. So, Chevron story, the met Missy at Chevron story is now just completely torpedoed. And so they bring her in for another interview on October 8th, and this one is with an FBI agent named Bridget Brock, and it's conducted at the FBI office in Savannah. And they confront her with these two findings. One, the security footage from Azalea and from Chevron. And two, what Missy has told them. And she just sticks to the Orgel story and just insists that it is true. And this is what that sounded like. She just hasn't had time yet to figure out how she's going to play this with this new information that they're presenting her with.
We'll talk about that, okay? Because Missy hadn't talked to you.
Yeah, she has.
She hasn't talked to you in quite some time.
Yeah, she
And
has.
she did not have a conversation with you about the Orgel.
Yes.
So in your mind, you've looked at all these timestamps and plausibly you came up with a story that's partly true.
No, that is
But
true.
there's very, very many missing pieces, right? And in your story, you haven't been completely honest about where you were at and why you were
I
there.
was 100% honest about where I was at. I showed the Life 360. I told my even gave him the Orgel that she gave me.
Right, and that didn't happen. We've already interviewed this.
Yeah, I got the Orgel. That did happen. She had that moment inside of her mouth. That's the reason why I asked her for it.
You have to stop saying this. It did not happen.
Yes, it did.
So that's the story on October 8th, sticking to her guns. Now, October 12th, she comes in for another interview. And this is with Brad Snyder, who I've talked about already, who you've heard a little bit from and seen a little bit of, and an FBI agent named Savannah Solomon that he works with closely. And this is at the FBI office. And this is a long interview. I've pared it down a little bit so we don't have to spend 3 hours watching it during the trial, but it's still fairly long. And initially, at least, she's sticking to the Orgel story. That's Savannah Solomon on the left, Snyder on the right, and the defendant in the middle.
And I did. Let's talk about that. I did. Please.
I did meet Misty, 100%. It happened. I'm telling you. And she tells this kind of flowery story describing this meeting. She lavishes them with details about how this went down.
So you went to Missy's house, and did you go inside her house? She was just understanding that that's not.
Yeah, that's not, like, I could explain.
How long did y'all interact there with Missy? How long were you there?
2, 3 minutes, it was a quick little conversation. Everyone knows her mouth, doing this stuff. She does some crack and stuff, and she did how much she was outside.
And now she has Misty was smoking crack when she gave the defendant the Orajel. And what is going on here is when the defendant is lying and telling a story to cover something up that she did.
Objection, Your Honor, at this point in time. Those opening statements, Mr. Dean has the right to say what he expects the evidence to show, not his interpretation of it. So,
Sustained. Mr. Dean, I'm going to ask you to move forward.
The evidence will show that she added this detail to suggest a faulty memory on Misty's part. To suggest that, you know, maybe this will help explain why Misty is telling them she hadn't seen me. And it is nothing to her to just accuse Missy, of having smoked crack during this meeting that didn't happen. But in any case, a few minutes later, she finally admits that she didn't see Missy.
You gotta understand, she doesn't have to be 100% truthful. 100%. That's the only way that we're going to take the document.
I didn't speak to the trooper, but I did tell her the house was just gone off in the middle.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because,
If the light was on, I would have knocked on the door. You know.
so, did you do any work last night?
I did go to bed that
What
night.
did you do work?
But I found it, and the car was one of the ones that I lost. And I found it when I got back to the house.
So after insisting on the 5th that she met Misty at the Chevron for Orajel, and after insisting on the 8th that was the truth, and after insisting even at the outset of this interview that it was true, she finally admits that it wasn't true and massages the inconsistency by saying, you know, I didn't speak to her, but I did go there with the intent of seeing her. And she adds a detail that hasn't been included in any of her stories to date. Oh, and by the way, yeah, you've asked me if I threw any trash away there. Yeah, I did throw some trash away. She has a story for what that trash was. The evidence will show she did not want to admit that it was Quentin's body. So she describes this trash that she threw away as stinky shrimp pasta that had been sitting in the car in a trash bag and smelling up the car.
Megan was just another kind of trash. They had a different trash. And Stan was taking trash out a few days ago, and there was spilled food all in my car. So I pulled around and seen my gas talking to food in my trash. Yeah. It was pork, like shrimp pasta.
Shrimp pasta?
Yeah. The whole car smelled like shrimp. Yeah, what is that smell? I felt that before I even left to go to a floor. You know? I didn't go to the floor and I'm like, get out of the car.
And they ask her about this. Gosh, you know, this is the most critical fact in the case. Throwing Quentin's body in the dumpster at Azalea. What she was doing at Azalea Mobile Home Plaza at 1:17 in the morning or so. And her explanation for that is, you know, it's just such a minor thing, throwing away some trash. I didn't think to mention it in my hours of previous interviews.
I really stopped. It was the only spot that I didn't think anything of. To be honest, it's just all food for the car. See, I have to do it out.
She does not want to talk about what was in that trash bag. They also revisit the drug use, and you'll remember the strong denials on October 5th, which are repeated on October 8th. Well, in this October 12th interview, she admits finally that, you know, I did take a Percocet that night.
And you had a focus in conjunction with smoking.
Yes, that's what once I took this, it was like at home. And when I started to put my cigarette,
And
by
that
the
would have
time,
been about what time would you have done that?
by the time I got home, I took it like 11 something or whatever.
And so Snyder asked her about her changing story. You know, you've been adamant that you met Misty for Oragel, and now you're finally admitting to us, oh, you know, I actually didn't speak to her. You've initially, over the course of 2 interviews, maybe more, didn't mention throwing trash away. And now you've got a very detailed account about doing that and what it was. And you, on the 5th, were adamant that you hadn't used any drugs other than marijuana. And now you're telling us that you did take a Percocet too. What's going on? Why is the story changing? And her explanation for that is, oh, well, my faulty memory might have something to do with all the cocaine I was doing that night, which is a drug that had totally been absent from all of her prior accounts and fits much more with the $80 Cash App than the story about paying off the drug front. And so she is explaining her inconsistent stories by adding another inconsistency, which is an admission to cocaine use.
You requested a short break. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's take a 10-minute break and resume with the opening statement. Mr. Dean, again, I'm going to ask you not to talk about the case, don't do any research about the case, avoid conversations about the case. The time now is about 11:29. Let's aim to be back here at 11:40. Okay, we're in recess. We are back on the order, back on the record in SBCR 22-03364J6. Counsel for the defense is at the table with Ms. Simon. Counsel for the state, along with Detective Lemons, are at their table. We haven't yet brought the jurors back in. Is there anything that we need to take up before we bring the jurors back in?
No, Your Honor, I'm ready to continue.
Not from the defense yet.
All right, let's proceed.
Jurors entering.
Okay, thank you. And so, for the record, the jurors are all back. They are being seated at this time. All right, all 16. Thank you, and Mr. Dean will resume with his opening statement.
So, October 12th, and we've come a long way from the October 5th account of only using marijuana that night. This is where we end up on October 12th.
Just before we left, and we took the trash the other day, you had cocaine, really upset, and
And in this interview, she acknowledges that this wasn't like the one night she used cocaine. She's a regular user of cocaine, which she had denied in earlier interviews. Now, at the end of the day, the most critical thing though is what happened to Quentin. What happened to Quentin in the middle of the night. And here is what she had to say about that. I don't know if I did something to him, but if I did, I will take responsibility. She appears to be claiming something like a lack of memory, and I'll tell you that the evidence that you'll see is going to show that when she drove to those dumpsters at Azalea to throw Quentin's body away, you can see that she's driving normally. You'll see that she comes to a complete stop at stop signs. She uses her turn signal. You'll hear evidence that the investigators could tell from her phone that she plugged her phone into the USB charger in the car when she got in. So the evidence will show that she was aware of what she was doing when she took him there, and that her claims to just not know what happened cannot be true. They do not fit with the other evidence. We've talked a lot about what she has been saying to the police and the FBI on the 5th, on the 8th, on the 12th. But we haven't talked much about the other aspect of the investigation, which is the effort to find Quentin and to figure out exactly what happened to him. So I'll talk a little bit about that now. Now, on October 18th, police announced that they believe Quentin's body to be in a local landfill and that they're about to begin this extremely challenging needle in a haystack search of the landfill. And this is how they got there. A detective with the Chatham County Police Department goes out to the mobile home plaza once these dumpsters become an area of interest after they've looked at the security footage. And he asks what garbage truck company services these dumpsters, and they give him that information. He gets in touch with that garbage truck company, and he learns that it was truck 309 from a 3909, I should say, from a company called Waste Pro. This is the list of stops for that truck on that day. Serviced the mobile home plaza. This is on the morning of October 5th, actually. Quentin wasn't in the dumpster for very long because it was emptied that day. And this, what I'll tell you next, kind of goes to explain Quentin's condition when they ultimately found him. Not an intact body, but in pieces, little pieces, bones. It's a front-loading garbage truck, extends its hydraulic forks into the slots on the side of the dumpster, and drops Quentin and all the other garbage into the box in the back of the truck. There's a compactor in that truck that compacts everything. And you want that compactor in there so that the truck doesn't have to go to the landfill as frequently. It makes the garbage smaller and take more garbage. That truck went to the Waste Management Superior Landfill on Little Neck Road on the morning of October 5th. This is a landfill ticket. They weigh the trucks when they're coming in. That's how they know how much to charge the garbage truck company for this particular load. This is for Waste Pro truck 3909. And with this information, the detectives go out and they talk to the landfill manager, and he's able to identify the area that garbage was being dumped and then kind of shoved to on October 5th. And this kind of general area up here, that becomes the search area. So they have kind of an idea, like a general box in the landfill of where Quentin is going to be found. But this is still an extremely difficult thing. Even if you know the general area, there's like 2 more days of trash that have since been dumped there since the 5th. And this stuff gets compacted and moved around. They drive these compactors over it that have studded metal rollers. And everything just gets shredded. You may have this idea that you go into a landfill and it's just like a pile of bags of trash, just like they were when you put them in your garbage can at home. It is not like that. You will see that it is not like that. Everything is shredded because compaction is the name of the game in landfills. You'll hear that. You got to get everything pressed down real tight because space is money. So at the end of the day, they have tons and tons of garbage to search through, and so they arrange the landfill search. They have some consultants from an outside agency come in and advise on this because it's a very technical thing. These consultants are able to tell them, based on the size of the box, about how many tons of trash they'll have to search through to exhaust the area, based on known rates of searching, like pounds per day. They're able to give them an estimate of how many people this is going to take and how much time it's going to take. They have to order specialized protective gear, steel-toed boots, Tyvek suits, respirators, gloves to put over the gloves. This is a biohazard environment. And they have to find volunteers, and this is an all-volunteer duty. Right? And for weeks, volunteers from the police department and from some other law enforcement agencies came out here early in the morning, and they do this landfill search that involves an excavator up in the search area, scooping up garbage, putting it in a dump truck. Dump truck comes down on this open area bounded by cones that they call the search deck. Excavator down here kind of spreads the garbage, that particular load, I think they were calling them lines, out onto the search deck. And the law enforcement officers, these volunteers, get online with rakes, and they just search through it. This is what that looked like. And they do this for days, weeks, in the heat,